So one of the first things that happened was, um, let's see, one of the best stories. Okay, in Alabama, there's a river. I'm sure it runs through other states called the Kahaba River. Okay, now the one I used to go to was called the Kahaba River Slab, and we used to go down there a lot, and we would cook out and eat, and sometimes camp and go off roading and swim. And there'd be other people there, and you'd make friends, and we'd have a blast. You know, it was before cell phones and all that was real big. You know what I mean? So you had to get out and socialize. You had to get out and know people, and that's how you made connections. Now everything's through phones. But anyway, so we would go out there and we'd have blasts. You know, and he had a big army truck like you see in the movies. They're called deuce and a halfs or whatever, and we'd go pile everything into that. You know, we could fit into it. Maybe a four-wheeler, camping supplies, canopies, food. We'd go glamping. That's what they call it these days. They call it glamping. Okay, well, we'd go glamping, and we'd have a blast. And well, one year before went, I remember him telling me that that him and his friends went on a little like excursion somewhere on the Kahaba, way out, and it's now a state park. It's really pretty though still, and there's lots of trails and mountain bike trails to ride. But I think there's a squatch out there or something like that, a rake, skinwalker, whatever people want to call it these days. I didn't see it, but I dang sure heard it. And so anyway, he was telling me that they went camping and they got drunk, and there was some construction equipment out there that people left the keys in, and them being old, you know, country boys, rednecks, whatever you want to call it, they got in them suckers and started playing around and having a blast. And after getting skunkered, you know, and all that, and food in their belly, they started passing out. And it was around 1:30 when this happened. He said that he woke up to his friends talking, and he's just in his sleeping bag, in his boxers, got his boots there near him, and his pistol in his boots. All of them carried firearms, you know. And he woke up to his friends talking and acting kind of disturbed, like, you know, what's going on? And they're like, shh, listen. And about that time, he heard just like an engine block or something hitting the water. You know how when you chuck a big rock into the water, or someone jumps into a deep body of water, it makes that real loud kaploosh, you know, like that, hitting the water. And it was every minute or so. Not even that. I don't know. It's been a while since you told me this. But so they keep hearing that. And so they're like, what the hell is that? And they grab their gun, and they're just out there, you know, in their skimpies. They grab their gun, they got their boots on, and they got their gun and little lights on their gun, and they're running through the woods looking around to see if they can find out where the sound's coming from, because it's getting louder and louder. And they get right up on it, he says, and they don't see nothing. I mean, they're shining their lights around, they don't see nothing, you know what I mean? No deers, no nothing. It's just quiet, all except for the leaves shuffling under their feet and that sound hitting the water, bloosh, bloosh, every couple of minutes. And so they just opened fire into the darkness, just da 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 da, open fire, okay, popping caps. And after they did that, okay, it got dead quiet. Well, they stood there a minute and waited, and they figured, well, whatever it was is gone now. You know what I mean? After popping off the, you know, I'm sure they mostly had 9mm or something like that, you know, small firearm. But I'm sure they thought, well, that scared it off. So they go back to camp. They talk a little bit about what the hell was that and stuff. And then about an hour or so later, it started doing it again. So they packed up what they could, you know, that they just needed to survive the night with, like their tent and sleeping bag, and they went on up the trail and went back to sleep, slept it off, came back the next morning, couldn't really find nothing. And this was a spot on the Kahaba River, like I said, in Alabama. This was a spot. And I remember him telling me that story. Well, shortly after that, we went on another camping excursion down there and packed everything up, and we had the four-wheeler, we had stoves, we had the works, you know, the little canopies you put up like you have like wedding or church service or some other kind of something under one of them big canopies. And it was like a 5-star resort right there on the dang riverside. We had everything you could need, you know what I mean? You had your smoke, you had your drink, you had your biscuit box, you had orange juice, and then we cook out like crawfish bowls and stuff. I mean, you had it all. So we get down there, we're all set up, and everything's going on like normal. You know, you're hanging out with friends, you know, and I don't really drink or do much smoking or anything anymore. I quit smoking cigarettes, so that's good, you know. But I quit vaping too. About the only thing I do is a dip. Yeah, I know it's not for everybody. But anyway, so we're having a blast. Everything's going on like, you know, it would any other day. And my cousin was, he could be strict at times, but normally he was pretty generous, especially once he got a few drinks in him and loosened up a little bit. And so we're normally pretty generous with food or drink or whatever we have. Hey, mi casa, su casa. Not many people are like that these days anymore, so it's that southern hospitality, I guess. But anyway, so we're down there, and like I said, we're sharing and we're having a blast, and these kids come up and want to ride the four-wheeler, and so, well, it's chicks, and you know, back then he's married and got kids now, but back then he had a weak spot for cuties. And so he lets them ride the four-wheeler, and they go off trail riding and whatever, and they come back and it had a flat. So we're down at the river, like it's not a far walk. I'd have to draw it out on a piece of paper, but like the main part was like you'd come in on a really windy road from the main road, and then there would be trails out there, but the main two spots was like the Boy Scout camp and then the slab. And before you got to the slab, you'd come up to a spot and you'd go down a trail to the left, and that was a Boy Scout camp. And then if you kept continuing straight, you would go straight to the river. A lot of times it would flood down there, and there's an old place where they used to cross with trucks. That's why we called it slab. It was like a concrete slab that went all the way across, but they had blown it up somewhere back in the day. And so halfway out there, it was just like a little drop, and you had to go through some rocks, and it would get back on the slab, and people would cross it all the time with four-wheel drives, four-wheelers, dirt bikes that walk across it and bust their ass but never spill their beer. And it was a four-wheeler, okay, much like this one right here I'm about to show you, okay? So give me a second. This is a Grizzly Yamaha. I forgot what the horsepower is on it, but the one I'm talking about was a Prairie 350 Yamaha, and it was very similar to this, you know, a little different, give or take. And it was a big four-wheeler, okay? A lot of power, you know, a lot of that low-end torque, and you could really get around with it, right? Okay, so anyway, it was it had a flat, so he told me, he's like, here, cuz, take this, go take it back to camp, you know what I mean? Take the key, bring it back to me, whatever, you know? So, I limped it back to camp with the flat tire, and I parked it, and I got off, and I start heading back up the trail, and the trail was like, at the time, it's smooth now going in there, because like I said, it's a state park, but at the time, it was like if you were in there coming out, there's like a little hill, and then it leveled off, and there was a mud puddle, and then it went back up a hill, which is kind of sideways, and it had the little, you know, washes in it where water had been running, that red mud color, and it was thick on each side. I mean, the brush was even thicker than this brush behind me, and it was like almost summertime, you know what I mean? It was late spring, and this brush back here was just, the brush was like thick on each side, the foliage. Okay, you could hardly see into it, even with the sun out like it is now. And it's really cold out here right now, by the way. I wish it was one. So, like I said, the brush was real thick, like really thicker than this, like, you know, it's wintertime now, obviously, but like I said, this was going into summer. And on each side of the trail was barely wide enough to get a car through, our four-wheeler or ATV or something like that. And it was thick foliage on both sides of the trail. You couldn't hardly see into it. Even with the sun out like this, like I said, you couldn't see it a couple of feet into it. So I'm not thinking nothing about it. I got a good buzz going, and at the time, like I said, I was in my mid-20s. So I'm just walking up the trail, minding my own, ready to get back to grab some grub and another beer or whatever. And all of a sudden, in the brush, I hear something moving, and I think, well, it's a deer or whatever, you know what I mean? And I kind of shrug it off, and I keep on walking up the trail. But then I noticed every time I'd start walking like this, and you could hear like my feet moving, I would hear that in the brush, that shh, 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 shh. And so I'd stop, and it would stop, but like a second after I stopped, as if whatever was doing it was watching me, okay? And so I'm like, that's kind of spooky. So I was like, okay, I got an idea. I dart real fast, like I just, you know what I mean? A couple of yards, and then I stop. And in the brush I hear, the same thing, but in the leaves you can hear I don't know if you can hear that, neighbors hollering, but anyway, you can hear all the crunching of the leaves in the thicket right there next to me. It was on my left. And in my mind, I was like, I don't know why, I was like, Bigfoot. I still don't like the woods at night. I've never liked the woods at night, okay? You call me a chicken or whatever, but I've never liked the woods at night, okay? My mind is that kind of mind. It was starting to play tricks on me, okay? But in my mind, it was just clicked, Bigfoot. And I just started bolting up the trail. I did not stop. I heard a four-wheeler coming down the main road, and I was like, I've got to get to the main road before that four-wheeler passes by, or whatever this is might have me for lunch. You know what I'm talking about? So whatever it wasn't no regular creature. I doubt it was someone messing with me, because like I said, back then, it's a state park now, but back then it was thick brush. I mean, you'd have to use a machete to get through it, okay? So anyway, I'm running up the trail, and I hear this four-wheeler coming, and I didn't even know it was he wasn't my real cousin. He's passed away now, God rest his soul. But he wasn't my real cousin. He was just kind of like a cousin to me. We were really tight. And he was coming down the trail, and I was running out there, and I was like, stop, stop, stop. And he slides to stop me. He's like, what is it, cuz? And I was like, man, we got to go. Something's after me. He's like, oh, man, nothing ain't after you. And I'm like, man, there's something chasing me, man. Let's just go. So we get back to the river, and everything's fine, And that was the last. I didn't hear it that night, because that night back at camp, we had everybody there, fire going, and there was music playing. Even when we went to sleep, the people next to us would play music, turn down low. And of course, sometimes you might hear somebody making love, but so the sounds of that would kind of drown out other sounds. I mean, you'd still hear like small critters like armadillos and stuff, brushing around, raccoons and stuff, but it was nothing like that. You know what I mean? So I think there may be, or either there was, a squatch, a rake, could have been a skinwalker, could have been any of the things. I think it was a Bigfoot. It seems like the type of spot a Bigfoot would be, you know what I mean? It's real thick, and it's a lot of places to hide. It's on a main river, you know what I mean? And now it's a state park, and I mean, I don't know, man, but I know it ain't the most scariest story ever, but that's my story when I was camping, and I was being chased by a Bigfoot. So at least I think that's what it was. It definitely was intelligent, because it knew to stop when I stopped and move when I moved. But anyway, so if you like this, hit like, maybe share it with someone, that's had encounters, or share your encounters in the comments below. And next time I'll tell you about what I think was the rake. And now I actually seen this. I wish I'd have got it on tape, but I actually seen this, and it was when I lived on a mountain. Not like an actual. It's a mountain, but it's like, you know what I mean. There's a road coming in from both sides, and people live up there. There's houses and everything, and there's spots where it drops off and winds down and goes into subdivisions. But it was a mountain, and so there was like cliff faces. Once you go so far one way into the woods or so far the other way in the woods, it would drop off, and there'd be a lot of rocks and cliff faces. And so I'd heard and seen things up there too, but I'll tell you about that one next time. And if you like this, like I said, hit like, share it with a friend, or tell me about something that happened to you. And you know, but all right, guys. Hope you enjoyed that. Like I said, I know it wasn't the most scary story, and but it is true. I'm not lying to you. Like I'm dead serious. If I could go back today and had a camera, I would probably try to film it because I was genuinely scared. Like I said, I couldn't see into the brush. I didn't want to stop to try to look into the brush. I would glance over, you know what I mean, to see if I seen something. But when something like that happens, you don't think. Your mind jumps to what you know, and you just, at least I do. I'm not sticking around. Like if I'm in the woods and I see markings on a tree that don't look right, or like something from Blair Witch Project or something, I'm out of there, man. I ain't sticking around. You know what I mean? I've had too many weird things. I'm gone. You're either with me or you're not. I'm going back the way I came and double time it. But anyway, thanks for listening. Like I said, like, share, comment, subscribe, whatever. Peace. Have a good one out there. Enjoy the rest of the winter, even though it's cold. And man, I can't wait for summer to come around the corner, and or spring. But I am still working on my motorcycle, so that will be done eventually. It's slow, but it's getting there. All right, guys, have a good one. Peace out.